Hey, how's it going? Good. Welcome to day 2. Check out my cool shirt. Woo! Feeling pretty good about this. I should introduce myself before I talk about my clothes, I guess. I'm Jessica Brillhart. I'm the principal filmmaker for Google VR. So why am I here? I'm not an engineer. I'm a filmmaker. I've been a filmmaker at Google for 6.5 years now. And for the past six years or so, the engineers and the filmmakers, we kind of work in different groups. But about a year ago, a group of engineers gave me this. And this is one of the first prototypes of the Jump rig. Jump, for those of you who don't know, is an ecosystem we've been working on for 360-degree stereoscopic content creation. It consists of 3 parts. The first is what you see here. It's a rig of 16 GoPros in an array. The second is the assembler that uses computer vision and cloud computing algorithmically to stitch the stuff together. This is one of the earliest stitches to come out of the Jump ecosystem. It's the engineers filming themselves in Seattle, and it remains one of my favorite things I've seen in VR. And stitching has always been this a really annoying time suck for VR creators, right? So being able to film and not have to worry about that process is a really big deal. And the last is playback, making it available to an audience. So I'm going to show you a lot of footage today. Because of the nature of this stuff, you're going to have to see it on a screen by sitting out there. So you have to trust me that in VR, this stuff is actually pretty great. It might still be great, I don't know. But thankfully, we've got this really great new platform that I'm happy to announce today, and we're calling it YouTube. And YouTube plays VR, which is crazy. So not immediately after this, because I've been kind of running around, but end of day today, I'm going to have a playlist that's going to have all of the stitches that you see here during the presentation. You can watch it on your Android device, and then recently we have now cardboard support on YouTube for the iPhone. So you guys will all be able to see it. So I've used the rig and the assembler to film over 750 shots over the course of a year. Or as my engineers like to say, 3,176,020 frames. And no one has filmed this much live action VR in the time that I have, as far as we know. And if you know differently, don't tell me. I like to live in my delusion. So why am I here? Basically, this sums up the past year for me. I was handed a new piece of technology, and then I used it to make stuff. And here's where we are right now. Because I was able to film so much and be able to see the results so quickly, I've been able to establish, for myself mostly, but also for other folks who are interested, a kind of language for making virtual reality content. So seeing what works and what doesn't. What ways, as a filmmaker, I need to rewire myself in order to make this stuff work. And because it's important for technology and art, I think, to be in constant conversation, I think it's important that I share with you guys some of the stuff I've learned over the past year. So I'm going to talk about these 4 things. The first is what every traditional film person faces, which is the loss of a frame as a device. The second is what that means for editing, and how something like editing can be reworked to suit what we want to accomplish in VR. The third is the realization that even though it's a camera, the camera actually represents a human the entire way through. And the fourth is the question on everyone's mind, storytelling, and how to do story in VR. So let's talk about the frame. The frame is a precious thing for a filmmaker. It's our medium. So we aspire to be masters at crafting this kind of window into another world. But a frame doesn't mean jack when someone can do this, right? And the whole point of film is that your audience never does this. But in VR, you do this because if you don't do this, you're doing it wrong, right? So in traditional cinema, we use the content of the frame to make sure people pay attention to what we want them to pay attention to. We think if we lose the frame, we lose complete control. And this makes filmmakers, a lot of them are credible ones that have been around for a while, makes them freak out. This is horrible, this is dangerous, and so on. But let's just breathe for a second. Have we lost complete control? Or maybe it just lives somewhere else in this. Us humans have a knack for following what calls attention to itself. No matter where it is, no matter where it goes. And in VR, we've been calling these elements points of interest, or POIs. And it's important to note, this does not just mean visuals. We tend to hear things before we see them. So spatial audio plays a big role in this as well. So let's take this glacier climber. That's one point of interest. He's the only human. He's the only one making a sound. And although we can't be 100% sure, because we never can in VR, we can make a pretty solid bet that someone will focus on him. So that's one POI. It can become very complex rather quickly, because life is very complex too. So if you take this tram scene, it doesn't present just one, but it presents 4 or more possible POIs. Or something like rocks, which is utter chaos. But to be honest, that just means that there's potentially everything is interesting to someone. I just can't take any bets or place any bets on them. So our control as creators is in this understanding of the potential experiences a world contains so that we can prepare for this, prepare for how someone might engage with a space. And our craft is really more about, as creators, how do we respond to the potential experiences that someone has, if at all. Which brings me to this. So when filmmakers talk about editing, we talk about putting frames or shots in a linear construct, right? There's nuance and there's craft, but generally that's where we're going, and that's what we talk about when we talk about editing. It's shot to shot and frame to frame. Now, when we tried this in VR, the cuts felt jarring and weird, and we pretty quickly knew that it did not work. So what happened? Well, for one, when we think about representation of editing in VR, we think about a predetermined frame-to-frame visual. And that's probably the wrong approach, especially when the potential of the frame could be anywhere. And so VR needs a different visual for understanding this potential. And in trying to figure out what that visual could be, I started drawing lots of circles. And lots more circles. And each of these circles was an attempt at mapping out the world of a given shot, basically taking this and thinking of this. So each shot is an experiential world. The fundamentals being the visitor's abilities, and the world. Now, I've actually been using this graph as a way of kind of getting through all my crazy thinking. And my colleagues now call them my crazy blue damn circles. So and I accept that. It's mine. I'll take it. But that also means that editing in VR can't be frame to frame, right? So instead of frame to frame, we think of it as world to world. And now I can see the potential for everything, where the frame is everywhere. Which is to say, our jobs as creators is not to preciously craft something that someone may never look at and then forget the rest of it, right? But instead to guide visitors through a crafted universe. And at the forefront of every new medium, we get the benefit of coming up with terms. And this is one of those terms, probabilistic experiential editing. It has a really unfortunate acronym. I mean, I can't do anything about that. So let me explain what I mean by this. Probabilistic experiential editing, at its core, is about understanding a visitor's likely interaction with the world around them. So first, let's get back to this idea of attention. If I make a solid bet on a particular POI, like this glacier climber, then I can make something or do something much like matching. I call it matching on attention. We do match on action in editing too, right? Something's moving, and we cut to something else that's moving. With this, it's about attention, cutting from someone's attention point to another thing that I may want them to see. So taking something like this, where I can gauge where someone might be, determine where a visitor's attention will most likely land, and then align the following world so that the attention point matches with something else I'd want a visitor to pay attention to. It could go from an attention point to something else that I want a visitor to see, much like this. Or it could just be a spatial thing, right? I just want you to feel spatially comfortable. So keep things spatially similar or to reinforce an engagement in a particular direction. And a visitor rarely starts and ends at the same place, right? If you do your job right, they're looking around. So attention shifts, as their attention shifts, our attention needs to shift with it. And then you start to get this kind of weird editing flow. Kind of a bit like how we've thought about in and out points, except now it's not where I think you should start and end. It's me understanding where you would like to start and end, and then responding to it. And then by doing this, we start to lay the foundation of a pathway through the overall experience, like creating a conversation or a dance of sorts with experiences of a visitor and the potential experiences of the worlds we create. Kind of like unlocking an intricate cipher. And I've been calling it, and consequently we've been calling it, the hero's journey. And this is a potential journey we can craft for a visitor. There is no guarantee a visitor is going to do this. In fact, what's been really fun is when the visitor starts doing that, and then goes away, and then comes back. And I can see that based upon their orientation of how they're turning during an experience, which is pretty cool. And it gives the universe coherence. It feels like it's all part of the same thing. Even if someone's not going down that path, there is this vibe that people feel like it's actually one long experience. And there's more to this, but I can't go through it because it would take forever, so consider this a primer. So we as filmmakers consider the camera to be this tool, right? And we move the tool around a lot and kind of frantically sometimes, and we put it in precarious situations. But in VR, whatever happens to that rig happens to a human being. So you can't just move the rig. That's like, okay, that goes into a whole other thing. But if I'm standing and I'm looking out at a really beautiful thing, and then suddenly I get picked up and then put somewhere else, I would hate that. Most people would hate that. So we have to actually think about what a human being will feel like if we do anything to that rig. Like, okay, I'm going to do this to this rig. How would I feel like if I had that happen to me? So a visitor doesn't show up when she puts on her headset. She shows up as soon as you press the record button. I think that's a really huge thing that we need to accept as part of this. So last year, when we came back from a pretty intense film shoot, we drew up a very high-tech chart to analyze the impact of everything we captured, because we need some way to call down these shots. I had to make it a little bit more PG-rated because of the conference, but you can see, looks awesome, looks not so awesome there, sounds awesome, sounds not so awesome there. What we call the vortex of confusion, where no one knows what's going on. And then the I feel awesome, or the impact. And it turns out that horses is the experience to beat. So what is I feel awesome? If the power of the frame is what we're after, and a frame is determined by where the visitor looks, then we need to champion the visitor. We need to care about how this experience makes people feel. So again, it gets complex, and there's many ways to do it, but for the sake of time, here are 3 examples. The first is having an identity. A rig in a space is always regarded as something, but when a person puts on a headset and they're in the space, they expect to be regarded as someone. So how do we do that? So the height of the rig, which we cannot see here, but imagine if you were a rig and you were my height, that would feel fine. You relate to me. Oh, this is fun. But if we are a young kid, but if I wanted to actually sit with you guys in the audience right now, and I sat down, I would be one of you versus me. So I think none of these worked. Okay, let's just think about this space right now. If I was a rig and I wanted someone to be the presenter, which would be terrifying, because you can imagine being a presenter is pretty terrifying, I would actually have a rig here at a level of mine. And it's authoritative. I look down on you guys, and I'm like, I'm the presenter. But if I wanted the person that is in the experience to feel like you, I would actually have the rig at your height, below. And that actually makes me relate to the audience instead of me. Now, granted, what people end up doing is they'll put the rig here, and the presenter will be here, and the people will be here. And then who the heck are you? Right? Who am I? Like, I'm not the presenter because there's a presenter, and I'm not you because I'm taller than you, so what am I? So that's a question you really have to ask yourself. We think of cameras as just capturing, but if we're capturing an identity, we really need to think about what that identity is, what the positioning is, what the height is. And eye contact. So this is actually a scene from something that we released recently for the Montreal Canadiens called Go Habs Go, which we're really excited about. It's a new jump film. There was a moment that I saw in this, and I'm like, okay, I know that people are probably going to be looking at the torch ceremony, folks, so I got to put this in. So I'm going to talk about eye contact for a second. You can connect with someone in a very profound way through eye contact. You probably shouldn't do it all the time because that makes you feel kind of weird. Like if someone kept kind of staring at you, would you feel cool with that? Like probably not. But if you do it kind of if you nuance it and do it right, it actually ends up being a really intimate moment. It's basically a close-up. So let's see it play here. Oh no. Can we go back a slide? I really want people to see that one. Thank you. Oh, wait a second. Is it not playing? Guess you have to watch the film on YouTube. Sorry, guys. So we love discovering things. It gives us validation in a space and some sense of purpose. So ownership of these experiences. Where you say to yourself, okay, I found this, and because I found this, this has value, and I have value. So like the need to present everything to a visitor is a bit old school, and honestly kind of boring. And especially when all someone has to do is turn away from that presentation of something for it to be ineffective. So I tend to try to place things more in the corner of someone's eyes so that the moments are discoverable by a visitor, so she can own those experiences more. So here's an example of how you can play with this. Notice if you don't catch me falling on my butt, I know I'm going to be fine with that. But if you do actually get to that point and you see it, you get motivation for understanding where I cut at the end. When Nick grabs my hand, we go to black. So if you see that, you see Nick grabbing my hand, that's the cut. If you miss it, it's fine. But if you catch it, it's your moment. And I think that's a really important thing to do for someone who's in the space. When I saw Weaver's The Blue, which is an experience made for the Vive, it's about being underwater, and it's a beautiful experience, and there's all this life everywhere because you're underwater. But what's great about it is they've actually planted experiences around you that they hope that you actually discover. It's not just chaos. There's some intricately laid out chaos, or intricately laid out moments within that chaos that they hope that you see. My next thing comes from a conversation with these two guys, it's Rand and Robin Miller, and they're the co-creators of a game called Myst. Seeing Atris in VR, for those who've played Myst, is pretty awesome and weird. But one of the most, it's like an amazing computer game. If you haven't played it, you should definitely play it. And Robin said something interesting. He says, what he does in a VR experience is that he actively identifies what a creator wants him to look at, and then he looks in the completely different direction. And I started to do this, and you'd be shocked by how little people plan for that space. So what do we do with that space? How do we craft that? What's there? So here's a scene from a film we made with Jump called Resonance. And we have a young girl, Kennedy, playing the violin. And behind her are her parents. And you would get a fine experience by watching Kennedy play the violin. Like, you don't lose anything. That's the whole point of the scene, right? But the fact that the parents are there, and if you turn and you see the parents and you hear the audio of her playing, there's something really beautiful about that moment. So, maybe the rebellion isn't so much looking the opposite direction, it's looking the easiest direction, and then I spike you in the face. Right? Gentle spikes. They're like happy spikes. So the nature of an experiential world and the people in it can have a profound effect on us. When we go into a room of people that we know versus when we go into a room of people that we don't know. It's different. We meet someone for the first time, it's how you do, you shake hands, you move on. But if you meet someone for the second time, you don't have to do that. That's different. Energy shifts and changes as we build relationships. So meet my family. And even though the rig is a strange and weird thing for them, it's like it's part of me. And because I hope they love me and care about me, they goof around with it as if it were me. It feels very natural. It's, again, hard to read from a screen, but in VR, it's, welcome to my house, which is, for me, kind of creepy, but let's be honest. And this is Google I/O in 2015. I mean, let's just ponder this for a second, And I just turned on the rig right before the keynote where Clay announced Jump. So all these people were coming in. And it's a very different feeling. He doesn't have the time to look at you. So, I mean, it's like, that's very different than a family, right? You got one group goofing off, and then you have this other group that's evaluating you and seeing if you're even worth their time. And Instagram moment, I guess. Now let's get back to the clip that I showed you in the beginning. And this is why I think I fell in love with this medium and why I fell in love with this clip. It's because it's a rig to them too. But they created it. They're so happy that you work. They couldn't be more stoked. And there's this feeling of joy that you just, I've been making films here for a long time, most of them about engineers, and I tell you, the fact that they set a camera up and just did this is remarkable. And captured this is remarkable. All right, so let's talk about story. And I actually don't want to talk about story yet, because I want to talk about this. Lots of what's being made in VR right now is mostly surface. It's mostly just about what we see and what we hear. It's like the first level of being somewhere. But being there goes much deeper. There's significant depth to what's possible, and we're starting to see more and more of this kind of exploration. So here are a few things I'm thinking about. Generally, it takes some time to know someone. We talked about that a little bit earlier, to feel comfortable being in a particular space. Yet in a lot of experiences, we're thrown into it, and then we're expected to relate to everybody there. But in life, it's a process. You know that, right? Like, eventually we come closer to someone else. Eventually we care. So what if we started building these relationships appropriately in VR too? Start with someone present but distant, and gradually bring them closer to us. Now, once we establish that relationship, is it eye contact and direct address? Is that the best way to connect? Maybe not. We found that shared experience is powerful stuff. This is as true for the virtual reality space as it is for the real world. We go through traumatic experiences. We go through great experiences. You can see it in someone else's eyes if they know that you've gone through the same thing. We've all felt that. So I feel like VR can provide some sort of outlet for that kind of profound connection. And when I watched Oscar Raby's The Ascent, I thought it was a great example of this. As the visitor, you are Oscar's father, reliving a tragic event. But Oscar is there too, and as a character, he's patiently leading you through this recreation. And I am not Oscar's father. He would laugh if he heard me say that. But I feel connected with him in a very profound way. I simply share this experience with him, and we're in this thing together. So what's the dialogue between the virtual space and the real space? What's the potential for something that lives in that tension? So right now, there's what goes on in the headset, which you didn't see, and then there's also what we do in the real world for that experience to happen. And if movement in the real world added to something or meant something uniquely narrative, like how do we potentially construct experiences that ride both worlds simultaneously? Tyler Hurd did this really great video that maybe you can't see, but we'll see now. All right. Imagine someone was dancing, or there's these dancing animations, and we'll show you that.
So if
and
you
this
want to
is,
dance like these guys, can you do that?
you can see this is Glenn Keane with the Tilt Brush guys dancing to the experience that Tyler made. And you can actually see a little bit of the experience there on the side screen there. But it's a simple thing. It's just like dancing, right? I'm in an experience and there's dancing, and now I'm compelled to dance outside of that. Like, what's the performance there? Like, what can we do with the actual real world that could be a result of what we experience in the virtual world? And how do we experience things really? In our lives, we know ourselves and we are us. I mean, that's just how it is. But in VR, we can experience different ways of being. And we can experience the world beyond ourselves and beyond how we have evolved to perceive it. 6x9 is a great example of this. It's how does an inmate in solitary confinement perceive the world? How does a situation like this truly affect him? Or how does it feel to see the world the way a computer algorithm might see it? This is Deep Dream VR. We worked with the artificial intelligence team on this. Pretty trippy, right? But artificial intelligence can actually provide some really beautiful insights into our perceived world. And Notes on Blindness is a remarkable piece. It's a VR piece based on the account of a man going blind, dealing with going blind. So this new form that we've known, this physicalness, this almost rigid world, transforms into something a little bit more beautiful and true.
That, as one goes deeper into blindness, the things which once one took for granted and then mourned the loss of, and then tried in a way desperately to compensate for, in the end cease to matter. They lose existential meaning. They are removed to the periphery of one's consciousness. They become irrelevant.
And I had grown to know these forms so well that when the forms started to actually break apart and the cathedral started to drift away, I sort of started to understand that's, maybe I'm not seeing things the way that I should be seeing them. But wait, there's more. I'm going to go through these super fast, but onboarding. People don't really understand VR 100% yet, so it's nice to have a couple of levels in the beginning of experience so that they know that it's VR. Extend and respond, like how they engage with the space. How do you extend that engagement? How do you respond to it? Let's do entanglement, social space. Like what if there is some space that you were in that is affected by someone who came before you? The weather changes, the colors change, the character shifts and change and evolve. Maybe something like this. Katie Newsom actually talks about this. She's been thinking about this stuff too. The idea that 360 space is a lot of space. Can you then start targeting things? Can you then start constructing spaces or worlds where it's really just about the 180 or the 270 or the 90, and different amounts of story are revealed at that space? Passive active, world function, reinforcement. Well, too late. Multiverse. I'm going to sound like a crazy person if I don't already. But the fact that, time is a linear construct too. What if all the different worlds we could travel through or tunnel through are all the same worlds but different things have happened in them? The story has emerged differently. There's a different character. There are supporting characters. She didn't end up with him. He became a monkey. I don't know. But basically, you have all these different worlds that exist, and you craft something based on that. Flocking. Okay, so story. Now we've gotten all that stuff kind of out of the way-ish. I mean, there's a lot more. There's a ton more. But let's touch on story. Let's think for a moment of story in film as a dense atom of stuff. And when you look at this atom, you get it. You see everything. Now imagine that atom exploding. That color and that light and that emotion and the characters, it's all over the place. And that's VR. And story has always been a way of transporting you to another place, or time or world, but the fundamental nature of VR is presence. There's no once upon a time anymore. There's no in a world. You're there. And the story emerges from when you do, or what you do when you're there. And it's a result of your existence. You as a visitor are now the storyteller. And our job as creators is this. Now, in order to do this, we still need a language, so that we can at very least make sense of it all. And in retrospect, cinema has had like 100 years to deal with this, to be able to come up with this language from which story sort of emerged. And there's a lot of unknowns here, but we are pretty excited about the language we've been able to discover so far, and we think it's a really great place to start. So. What's next? I don't know. But I do know that as I start to come up with more insights, as we discover more things about what's going on in this medium, I want all of you to know about it, as crazy as they may seem to me and to my team. But I'll publish them on Medium. My channel on YouTube, feel free to check that out. That has a lot of the films that I talked about today. I'll have a playlist for all the content that I showed you. And I think overall, what I want to just say is it's a crazy time to be in VR. We've been talking very pragmatically, but I think it's time that we kind of hunker down and start really thinking about what's going on here. And I can't wait to see what you guys discover in the next year. So, thank you.